Okay, so we will go ahead and get started. We've got some wonderful, fun things to talk about today, so I can't wait. So I wanted to just, of course, welcome everyone. If you've been attending, welcome to you. If this is your first time, then we're so happy you decided to join us. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that you enjoy the program. So we have, I mean, it's crazy to think that this is our last program, that this is our last program of the semester, but we have moved through 4 units. I think sometimes I forgot to even mention that we were moving through the units, but we are, and we have. So we first started with history of the book. We discussed everything from medieval manuscripts to Black print culture, which was, we remember those were some great discussions. We did our classic literature unit. So we talked about everything from the works of Jane Austen to Charles Dickens. Sometimes we explored single works like The Color Purple or The Scarlet Letter, kind of rediscovering those. And then we did our writers and genres unit. We talked about big themes and innovative writers, like talked about Gothic literature, emerging scholarship on hip hop, medical books, the importance of travel guides and well-known literary works, and all different kinds of things. And now we're in our book collecting unit, the how of collecting. And so last week we got a chance to talk with a real rare book dealer about her life and work. And then today we're going to be talking about collecting a type of household book that is, we would probably consider ubiquitous, but it's frequently used, but sometimes underestimated in terms of its research value and historical significance. And those are cookbooks. So that's kind of where we are, and that's where we're going to end for the semester, but it's going to be a good one. So let's go ahead and start with our Where's Andrew segment. Andrew, you look like you are in a very regal place. This looks
very nice. Very nice.
It's very nice. Okay, so this has something to do with cooking, cookbooks, culinary, something like that?
Yes, I went looking for something like the Chef Boyardee Public Library. I could not find it.
Right.
I went with this instead, but it does have a cooking connection.
Okay, it does have a cooking connection. We might need a clue for geography for this one. Can you provide us with something?
Is it in Italy?
No.
Paris?
No.
London?
England.
Not in London, but it is in England.
Okay, it's in England.
Is it Canterbury?
No.
Looks like a church.
Is it a palace?
Actually, no. It was built in 1900. At least that's when it opened.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Is it the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts?
No.
Good guess, Helen.
That's a really good guess, yeah.
Is it north or south England?
Northern.
Is it in Oxford?
No.
It's not that far north, but
The York.
Could you repeat that?
York.
No.
is it part of an educational facility?
Yes, it is now. It was not originally, though.
Okay.
But it's not in Scotland.
Not in Scotland.
Oh, you're stumping me.
Yeah, I don't think I know. Does anyone have any final guesses? Because I don't think I'm going to get it this time.
Is it in Manchester?
Yes.
Oh!
Whoa.
That's all I know. Sorry.
That was a good one, though.
That was enough. That was good.
Yeah.
This is the John Rylance Library in Manchester, opened in 1900. One of the books of their collection is The Form of Curry, which is the oldest known instructive recipe book in the English language.
Oh.
Wow.
Oh, very cool. And of course, Andrew has a wonderful handout for us in the chat. Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay, very, very good. Great work, everybody. We got close. Yay. Oh, that's always so informative. Again, it's funny now that we're doing these every week. It's not only we're not only learning about all these different libraries and interesting in universities. I'm also kind of learning some more geography as well. So that's learning where cities are located and situated in relationship to one another. So that's really good. Yay. Well, thank you again, Andrew, as always. And thank you so much for doing this entire semester, coming up with these wonderful places, developing the handouts. We really appreciate it. So yes, round of applause for Andrew. Thank you so much. Yay. Okay, so now we're gonna move forward. This is gonna be so much fun. I'm going to introduce Camilla Stegall. Camilla, did I say your last name correctly this time? I did. Okay, very, very good. So I've known Camilla for about, I think almost 3 years now. So I'm going to introduce her, and she's going to be our speaker today before we do our fun show and tell. I think you are going to love hearing about what Camilla's been up to. So just for those of you who don't know her, in addition to being a weekly attendee of Coffee with a Curator programs, Camilla is a KSU honors student embarking on her final year of school in this upcoming year. Camilla is majoring in history and pursuing minors in public history and German. She has a passion for cooking and culinary research. She's also interested in Civil War era archives and rare books. Camilla started volunteering with our department about 2 to 3 years ago, and she is one of our star students. I always say that if I could hire Camilla, I would. We'd be sharing an office tomorrow. Over the past year, Camilla has completed an applied learning experience with the Bentley Rare Book Museum. This is a unique type of program sponsored by the Honors Program, and it allows her to conduct research and apply her skills in a more independent format. And she has done all of this remotely. So that means a lot of Teams meetings with me. So Camilla is probably super sick of me right now. Working with a lot of digitized material, conducting research without easy access to physical books from her school library. So she's done a great job with this. Camilla has produced exemplary work, and she's heightened interest in the Bentley's culinary collections in the process. So I am so proud of her. So Camilla is basically just going to give us kind of a brief presentation about what she's been up to, and specifically her collection development project, because Camilla has been practicing being a curator and developing our rare book collection. So Camilla, you should be able to share your screen for your presentation, and then I think you can let me know if you have any issues.
All right, can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. There we go. So for the past year, I've been working with the Bentley's Culinary Collection, and I've been having an amazing time, and I'm excited to share with you guys my projects. So my first project and an ongoing project that I have is a Cooking with Rare Books, or a Cookery Corner blog for the Bentley. And these 2 books I focused on last fall: The English Housewife from 1631. And those of you who might remember my presentation on my cookbooks last year, remember that Miss Joellen recreated the best pancake recipe from The English Housewife. We found out that it was not the best by any means, but that humans have been frying dough and covering it in sugar for a very long time. The other cookbook that I have is Let's Talk Turkey, and this one's from the 1940s, so a bit closer to our time, and it's an oral history, travel guide, and cookbook of the White Turkey Inn, which was located in Connecticut. Unfortunately, it was demolished, but luckily we have this cookbook that keeps its memory alive today. So these were the 2 books I focused on last semester, and Let's Talk Turkey, I had the opportunity to collaborate with the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Liberty Hill chapter. They were creating a cookbook, and the Bentley had the opportunity to submit one of its recipes to the cookbook, and I chose old turkey hash. turkey hash, particularly hash really, has colonial and New England roots, and I thought that fit nicely with the Daughters of the American Revolution. And now the Bentley has a recipe in another cookbook. The cookbook I focused on this semester for the blog was the Settlement Cookbook, The Way to the Man's Heart by Lizzie Kander, and the Bentley has the 18th edition, which came out in 1930. And for my blog posts, I usually focus on historical context for both the book and the food history involved in it. And I also like to do special holiday posts. So for Halloween last year, I did a special on coffin pie crusts from The English Housewife. And from the Settlement Cookbook, Joelle and I came across dessert recipes called Kisses, which can make excellent Valentine's Day blog posts. And these were meringues, and so I made the original ones, which I shaped into hearts, and coconut ones, which were featured in the Valentine's Day menu. These are not my first attempt at the meringues by any means. When I was researching them, I was like, oh, I've never made meringues before. And you could tell the first time. So here we have a nicer product, and that made it onto the blog. And I did not go for historical accuracy. Kander suggests that you whip the eggs by hand. And since this is the 21st century, I took the opportunity to use an electric mixer. But I feel it's kept the tasty vibes that Kander was searching for with her recipe. And this also led to another unique collaboration with the Bentley, in that we collaborated with Barbara Oldham from the Department of Health and Wellness, and she's a dietitian there, and she does cooking demos. And so Joelle and I joined her on a cooking demo while she made the meringues. Miss Joelle and I discussed the Bentley, this cookbook, and Lizzie Kander and my experience making meringues. And so that was an opportunity to have book education, book history, food education, food history all come together in one tasty half hour. So for my other main project this semester was collections development, and in this case it was collecting cookbooks. And when we suggested the collections development project, I had no idea what kind of books I wanted to look for. I was just excited to find any books that I thought would be able to help the Bentley. And Miss Joellen suggested Wartime Cookery. And I was so thrilled because, as she mentioned, military history is my other main interest. If there was a military history concentration at KSU, I've probably finished it by now. And so I was excited to use both my interests and find some nice things for the Bentley. And so for my Wartime Cookery, I focused on the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. And I was really excited, but I really didn't know how to go about doing this, and Mr. Whalen guided me through the process. That first, I would do some secondary research, find out what historians have said about the food at the time, the books at the time, the publishers at the time. So since this was all done virtually, I hit the library in a virtual way and went to KSU Super Search, and I put in things like American Civil War eating, American Civil War food, American Civil War books, and I did this for all three wars, and I was able to come up with at least one nice source for each war. But what happened with all of those sources is it gave me dozens of cookbooks, and that was an excellent problem to have, but I had to narrow it down to two cookbooks for each war. And then I wrote up proposals for Mr. Whalen explaining why I believed they were good for the Bentley and how they would be beneficial for them to use them. And so from here on out, I will be focusing on the source texts that I found and then a little bit about each of the cookbooks that I chose for each war. So for food in the Civil War, I chose, I had books by Dr. Helen Zoe, or Zoe Veit, from Michigan State University, and her area of focus is food history. And she edited two collections called Food in the Civil War Era, both for the North and the South, and each chapter is dedicated to a prominent cookbook of the era. And because of the Bentley and KSU's location near Atlanta and the Kennesaw Mountain battlefield, I opted to focus on the South. And so for the first first cookbook I had was the Confederate Receipt Book, and this was published in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy, in 1863, right in the middle of the Civil War. This is a collection of receipts or recipes that were featured in newspapers, and this cookbook is the only official cookbook that was created during the Confederacy. There's a lot of recipes, but one of the most prominent things of historical value is substitutions, which have been called Ersatz, which is the German word for substitution. And you can see these at the bottom right, substitution for cream and substitution for coffee. And for substitution for coffee, you take acorns and crush them up to make coffee.
Right.
So we can see exactly what kind of changes the Confederates are having to make as deprivations happened while the war went on.
Camilla, do you know why they use the German word for substitutions?
I'm not sure exactly. I do know that in the 1950s, a very prominent book on this, the substitution process, was called Ersatz. So I feel like that she might know a little bit more about that, but I just found that was interesting they used the German word.
Yeah, interesting.
Then for the next book that I chose for the Civil War era was What Mrs. Fisher Knows About Old Southern Cooking. And this was written, or probably more likely orally dictated, by Mrs. Abby Fisher in 1881. And this is significant for multiple reasons. It is one of the first cookbooks written by an African-American woman. Abby Fisher was formerly enslaved and was probably in her early 30s when the war ended. But she had spent over 35 years as a cook throughout the course of her life. And when she wrote this cookbook, there was a lot of interest and popularity in old Southern cooking. And either from people who felt nostalgia for it from the South and people who were just curious other ways. And so these cookbooks became immensely popular. But what made her stand out was that she was someone who actually had firsthand experience making these recipes, whereas the white women writing the other books would have had little to none. So this is very prominent in African American experience and foodways history. And if there are questions in the chat, I unfortunately can't see them, but I'll be more than happy to cover them at the end.
Yep, I'll manage those for you, Camilla.
Thank you. And so now we move on to World War I, and I used another book by Dr. Veit, and I will link her website in the chat at the end because she offers up a bunch of information about foods from these different eras and also has digital information like digital online exhibits, which will be fun to look through. And so Modern Food, Moral Food shows how progressive ideals at the time influenced how Americans ate during World War I. At this time, we see an influx of the influence of morality and rationality in food, and there was an individual desire for self-control around food. And we also see the rise of nutritional science, looking at things in terms of calories and fats and proteins. So all these went hand in hand with the U.S. Food Administration that began in 1917 to ship food over to Europe to help Allied soldiers and European citizens. And so unlike World War II, the propaganda that came from the U.S. Food Administration, there wasn't a rationing system. It was completely voluntary, but people were more likely to do it because of these progressive ideas for self-control, and it was mostly based off propaganda. And two books that I chose from the World War I era. The first one was Food Saving and Sharing. And this isn't a cookbook, but rather an educational book for middle grade children to teach them about nutritional science and how foods are beneficial for them, while also putting in the context of America's involvement in shipping food over to Europe and how America played a role then and in the war, basically setting the scene for how America would become a world superpower. And we can see once again the Food Administration was involved and the Department of Education. And this book came out maybe a month after World War I ended. The other book from World War II is an actual cookbook, and it's called Foods That Will Win the War and How to Cook Them. And this came out in 1918, and it emphasized wheatless, meatless, and sugarless foods and overall food conservation so that these high-calorie foods could be shipped to Europe. And this is heavily influenced by the U.S. Food Administration, and throughout the cookbook you can see propaganda. And we can also see the rise of nutritional science and home economics, as one of the authors is the director of the School of Modern Cookery. So this is a very interesting cookbook, and a lot of the recipes could be easily made today. And now we'll move on to World War II. I said goodbye to Dr. Veit and hello to Jessamine Newhouse and her book, Manly Meals and Mom's Home Cooking, which emphasizes gender roles in the 20th century, but also cookbooks. World War II, like the other wars, there were other cookbooks being made. They weren't all wartime cookbooks, but in World War II, there was a significant amount of war cookbooks. And these cookbooks often emphasize the same things: how to cook on rationing, how to make meatless meals, or how to stretch out meats and other foods that were rationed, and then the importance of nutritional meals, but they have to be tasty too. And these were important for the defense workers, and so we see the importance of lunchbox meals at the time as well. And all this time, while American women were going to work in places that men had been drafted and now women were taking their place, there was still the emphasis, especially in cookbooks, that women's role was in the kitchen. So one of the first book I chose from World War I is actually a pamphlet from General Mills called Your Share. And while only 60 pages, it is filled to the brim with information, recipes, tips and tricks, and gender roles for women about how they should continue to make delicious meals in the kitchen to help the defense workers and overall morale. And we have the message about that from Betty Crocker herself. And we can also, one of the most interesting parts about this book to me was that it has a whole section about how people would be able to continue to do social events with food during a time of rationing. That wasn't something I had thought about before, but in some ways it was bring your own food if you had that rationed, or there were some things that that weren't rationed, so people were able to eat those more freely. And then the final book that I chose was Coupon Cookery. When I went into the World War II cookbooks, I knew that there was an interest in how people were cooking with rations. And this book, as we can tell from the cover, is heavily based on ration cooking and has menus and this changeable table of point values for all foods, which was a part of the rationing system. Prudence Penny also shows a part of life in the 1940s. She was a fictional advice columnist, kind of like a Dear Abby. And this book, while we can see it's red, white, and blue, it's filled to the brim with propaganda. I was not able to see all the inside of this book, but I was able to find out that most chapters begin with a propaganda image and then a poem. And I was able to identify one image of propaganda from this cookbook, because this book also talks about women's roles in ration-based cooking, but also lunchbox meals. And this is the image they have for a lunchbox. I don't know if anyone else has seen Captain America, the first Marvel movie, but there's an oft-repeated phrase in there that he will sock old Adolf in the jaw, and it looks like this lunchbox is taking on that role as well. And so this was a very exciting piece, and I would like to say that this is one that tipped me over the edge for Coupon Cookery. There were a couple others vying for this role, but I thought, how could a Bentley miss out on some visual education like that as well? And so while I used these major source textbooks for my project, I would also like to mention that ABE books and Alibris were helpful. Those bookseller descriptions that we talked about last time really helped me find out about books that I wasn't able to look into from other institutions. And if you're interested in World War II cookery, there appears to be a lot of blogs and podcasts out there, so a Google search could help you find a lot of information really quickly. And so thank you all for listening, and I will stop sharing my screen so we can move on to show and tell.
Yay! That was so great. Thank you so much, Camilla. Does anyone have questions for Camilla about anything she's done this semester or about the cookbooks that she recommended for the Bentley collection?
What year was that Gender Roles in Modern America cookbook published? The Manly Meals?
I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that one was like either the early 2000s or 2010.
Yeah, so, and that's another thing that I wanted to, Camilla and I talked about this before she was going to present. It's really exciting that there are so many wonderful secondary sources. So sometimes we need to start looking at, or oftentimes we start with secondary sources to kind of understand the landscape of, a specific field or subject area or period of history, and then we can select some, find the primary sources that we're actually looking for. So it's, doing research is just so much fun. Camilla, you're getting a lot of praise in the chat. So thank you again for this wonderful presentation. Yay. Okay. So, if there are no more, if you have a question for Camilla that you think of later, just put it in the chat. And we'll make sure that, that Camilla sees it. But we are going to go ahead and get started with our show and tell period of cookbooks, because I felt like, this is something that, again, no pressure if you don't want to show a cookbook, you don't want to talk, that's totally fine. But for those who do, this is something that a lot of us people have, and maybe you don't actively, intentionally collect cookbooks, but a lot of us end up with a collection of cookbooks at some point in our lives. So lots of fun. Would anyone like to go first? You can just raise your hand, or anybody want to? Okay, Maggie.
I'll start. So I was one of those people who ended up with a collection of cookbooks but didn't mean to, from my grandmother and my mom. And then I started intentionally adding to the collection, and it's been so much fun finding really obscure, just at used bookstores and stuff like that. Another fun thing is that now my friends give me cookbooks that they find from their church, from Goodwill, from their parents. And so I brought today not a book, but all the recipes that were stuffed inside books and inside a little coupon box from not only my family, but my best friend's family. And I put them all into a binder. I know you can't see it, but they're handwritten. Some are typed, some are printed out. I have Girl Scout recipes in here, stuff that I've printed out, stuff from my grandmother. And then the most interesting, I think it's fun, right here, I have a tab dividing it. It says Wilson, because the front half of the notebook is my family's recipes, and the back half of the book is Anna's, my best friend's family recipes. And she was going to toss out this whole shoebox, and I was like, what is your problem? Because this is like genealogy history gold right here, and so it's like, I don't know. I thought I'd go a little out of the box, or a little out of the book, if you want to say, and share my collection rather than a bound book. So
That's awesome. So, and for those who don't know, Maggie is also a genealogist. So
yeah.
Go figure. That's really cool. So now you've got stuff from your family and from a friend's family.
Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
If she ever wants it back, she can have it. I'm just saving it for her, but she might not. But anyway.
That's really cool. Thank you so much. And that's different. So thank you so much for sharing that, Maggie.
Yeah. And the thing I mentioned was that most of these things were tucked inside of recipe books from my grandmother that were passed down to my mom. And I really wondered, should I keep them inside the books, original order and all that, or should I put them in a binder so they'd be preserved better? And it was a real mental tug of war, but I went ahead and took them out.
That's awesome. Yay! Thank you so much, Maggie. Let's see. Who else would like to, or who would like to go next? Okay. All right, Mom, you can go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, adorable.
Okay, I'm here with my assistant, Eliana. but I'm going to be quick because I'm not sure how much time I'll have. I did want to share a cookbook that I brought entitled A Little Taste of Zion. This book was compiled in 1999 by the Homecoming Family and Friends Day Committee at our church, Zion Missionary Baptist Church in Roswell, Georgia. And this book is special to me for several reasons. I've been a member of the church for about 23 years now, so I do know most of the contributors to the book. They're very close friends of mine. And I also contributed a recipe to this book. So I think that's the only time I've ever done that. And in the back, it has also some Bible verses and scriptures and encouragements, which is also neat to look at. But this book is really special to me because of one particular recipe, and it is for supreme pound cake, and it's by a woman named Mother Grethel Lovelace. And I just want to share a little bit about her. She was born in 1917, and she and her husband moved to Roswell in the 1930s. And she was a great woman of faith in the Lord Jesus. She was a spiritual advisor in the church and in the community. I met her when I first started going to Bible study, when I first came to Roswell in 1996. Her home was very close to the church, and just about everyone knew where she lived and who she was. And she was known for her cooking. She didn't say a lot of words, but when she did, she always spoke with great wisdom. I remember that about her. And she passed away in 2013. And I got some of this information from her. This is her homegoing program that I saved. She was a very special lady. But now about the recipe, here it is. Years ago, I knew that my husband really liked a good, rich pound cake, and I did not really know how to bake one. So when I got the cookbook and I saw her recipe, I was like, all right, I have to make this. And I did, and my husband loved it, and everyone who ate this pound cake loved it. So I credit Mother Lovelace with giving me the confidence that I could make a really good, rich pound cake. And so this is my go-to recipe, as you can see from the batter splatter that's on this one page. This is the recipe that I go to most of all. So this cookbook is very special to me for that reason.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that pound cake, it is very rich. It has like 6 eggs in it. It's
a wonderful recipe.
Yeah, it's a really good. Yes.
You say hi?
Yeah. Hi, Hen. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, who would like to go next? Okay, the Cohens. Oh, you're muted.
I'm unmuted. Okay, this is Cooking Secrets from 1957 from the Sisterhood of the Temple Synagogue in Atlanta. And that's where I grew up, and it's very nostalgic to me. So all the women who have submitted recipes are in here, and names that I remember from when I grew up, and it's just important to me. I also have a Jell-O, but this is from 1979, only $1.99, but it makes the best lemon meringue pie ever.
That is great. Camilla, we love Jell-O cookbooks.
So that's it.
That is so exciting.
Yeah.
Do you actively cook from those books still?
The lemon meringue pie, absolutely. When I make it, I have to make 3, one for each of my kids.
There you go.
All eat their own. So Cooking Secrets every once in a while for, religious holidays. I use that.
That is great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. Great. I love how it's like those 2 are your ones that are really special. I know that a lot of cookbooks can be special, but I'm so glad you were able to kind of out.
Oh, yeah. But these are old, so that makes it good.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. How special. Okay, Adina, I see your hand.
Hi, y'all. I want to share actually a couple of cookbooks that we collected for an exhibit that we did back in 2016 at the Museum of History, and Holocaust Education, called Nourishing Survival, Food During World War II. So this kind of relates a little bit to Camilla's presentation, but the book I want to highlight in particular is this one. It's called In Memory's Kitchen, A Legacy from the Women of Tourism. And it is a collection of recipes that were handwritten down by a woman named Mina Pachter, who was essentially in a barracks with older women. And in doing the research for this exhibit, this process of cooking with memory is something that is common to people who have been imprisoned and kept on essentially starvation rations across the world. So we, in addition to this cookbook from Theresienstadt, we collected a cookbook called Recipes Out Bilibid, which was POWs at a Japanese prisoner of war camp. But really this whole process of passing the time and taking joy, in a lot of ways, it's a kind of a form of resistance of remembering amazing things that you've eaten and celebrate in the past. So the recipe, I want to show you a little bit what the inside looks like. You can see this. So there's an image of the original handwritten recipe. The recipe in this case, this one's written in German, Ausspiegel Schokoladetorte. And then it's a rich chocolate cake. And most of the recipes are very decadent in this book, and in a lot of these others, people are remembering their absolute favorite, most celebratory recipes. And one of the constructions that I just found that came up over and over again among these recipes is the idea of egg whites that are beaten into snow. And this use of the term snow, in a lot of cases, there's actually not even a reference to the fact that it's egg whites beaten into snow. It's like shorthand for snow. So this is something I've actually come to look for in a lot of older recipes over time. So, we'd recommend it as just a work of history, but it's just a really interesting, great. I want to try some of these recipes. I have not actually tested them out, but.
Oh, Adina, that is so interesting. And I love kind of that idea of recipes from, and that, when you're in a period of, suffering and starvation and remembering, finding joy and remembering the recipes that you love the most, that's incredible. Hey, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll have to try some of those. that decadent chocolate cake sounds like one we could work on. I love it. Anybody else would like to, or does anyone else have a cookbook to share? Lori, and then we'll do Morgan.
Sorry, I always have to find my unmute. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So the book that I brought today is considered to be the Bible of Southern cooking. And this book is called Southern Cooking. It was published in 1928 by a woman named Henrietta Stanley, and Stanley Dull is her married name. But she actually, in professional circles, only went by Mrs. R.S. Dull, or S.R. Dull. I always get them confused, because she was very proud of her marriage to Mr. Dull, and that was her small way of honoring him and their marriage. So this little book is so fragile, and I'm going to be very careful in opening it, but I want to tell you a little bit about who Mrs. Dull is. She was an extremely important figure in Atlanta and in the South in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because she is the one who introduced home economics to education. She lobbied the state school board and said, I'm noticing that young women do not have the domestic skills that they need, I feel like they need, in order to support and provide for their families. And I would like for you to consider starting a program, letting me start a program. And they did. They gave her that opportunity. This particular book is a little special because it, couple of reasons. There were, when this book was published, it's estimated it sold about 250,000 copies. There are not a lot in existence anymore because of the nature of what it is. It was handled a lot. They really didn't survive because this was in almost every household in the South. But currently, there are only 22 copies. For those of you who are familiar with WorldCat, which is a global library holding tracker, there are only 22 copies of this edition in libraries throughout the world at the moment. So I think this is pretty special. You'll see this come up for sale in the marketplaces from time to time. And they range in price. It really depends on condition. But I like mine. I hope I can show this to you without my little book falling apart, because it's actually, I don't know if you can see that or not. That one's actually signed.
Yay!
So now, I have speculated over time that I have to wonder if this wasn't a personal copy of Mrs. Dull's, because there are the ephemera contained in this book is as hefty as the book itself, where she has written recipes on the backs of envelopes. She was actually, she wrote a column or a whole page for the Atlanta Journal for years, for like 20 years, on home ec and cooking. And she provided these recipes that when she was a little girl, her family had cooks in their employ. And she observed these recipes being made and these meals being generated from a minimum amount of ingredients and achieving these extraordinary family meals. And she committed them all to memory. She didn't write them down at the time. So as a young woman, she started cooking these meals that she remembered from her childhood, and then she started writing them down at that point. So she was living in a world of handwritten recipes, and when her husband became mentally ill about a decade into their marriage, she became the breadwinner for their family, and cooking was how and her knowledge of cooking was how she provided for her family. But her recipes were in such great demand that by 28, she said, I need to assemble all of these into a book, and which she did. It is still in publication. I don't know which edition it's on at this point, but I know in 41, the first major edition revision to this book was, I think it went to a print run of 150,000. So, and like I said, it's still in publication today. But it's important to know that she, as an individual, really helped shape. She considered home ec to be a science. It was not about trying to keep women in the kitchen with Mrs. Dull. She wanted to empower women so that they could provide for themselves, or, and it was that first step away for female independence. In my mind, that is how I perceive all of the hard work that she did. But it was so important to her that young girls know how to basically survive out in the wild, that she wanted to be a part of giving them those skill sets. I'm going to drop a link. She's such an interesting character, and I know I don't have time to tell you so much that I want to about her. But I'm going to drop a link to a really nice blog about Mrs. Stegall that, if you've got time, would love for you to read it. It's very informative. It was written in consultation with her granddaughter, so it's very authoritative. But one of my life goals is to actually cook my way through this cookbook, like people have done with Julia Childs. But one other point that I want to mention is she was an ambassador. The gas cooking technology was introduced into the South about, I think, around 1910, and Atlanta Gas Light hired her as an ambassador to go out into households and conduct demonstrations on women cooking with gas in their kitchens and in their homes. And it was a culture shift, because women were initially scared of it. It was high explosive in their kitchen, but she worked really hard to get people comfortable. And as you know, most of us have access to gas stoves at this point, and she's a big part of that. But anyway, thank you for letting me show my little fragile Mrs. Stegall book.
Hey, that is so interesting. And Helen and Maggie probably already know this, but we have a copy here in that was kind of our connection in the Marion Thomas and archival collection. And it's so interesting because you were saying that it was, this was something that many Southern kitchens had. And so it sounds like Marion Thomas, or either his wife or mother maybe, or probably used this. And in this book, similarly, there are so many handwritten recipes. It looks like maybe they got recipes from a variety of places, but I see recipes for Beatrice's rolls, for pecan pie. There's one for white fruit cake, all different kinds of things. And they're all, I can't really show without it.
Now, one recommendation I would make for anyone who collects cookbooks of this period is there's food in these. And like, for example, my bread section in look at that. Yeah. My bread section in my book has flour in the pages.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are very few pages in this book that don't have some kind of evidence of handling. I highly recommend that you either dust the book out or contain it, because that food stuff does draw organisms, and they will try to eat the book, which I also think contributed to their rapid deterioration, Joy Ellen, by the way. So anyway, just throwing that out there. If you do collect these and they do have stuff on them, try to clean them as much as you can, or seal them so that they don't put little creepy crawlies in your other books.
Yeah, Valerie Fry, who wrote the book Preserving Family Recipes, I think she suggested, if you're going to cook with a cookbook, maybe put it in a Ziploc bag while you cook, like lay it open, and then while you cook, put it in a Ziploc, and then all the batter and flour hopefully won't get in there too much, because I love that, but you're right, it does lead to the deterioration. Thank you so much, Lori.
You're welcome.
Morgan, do you want to share your cookbook?
Yeah, I got this book a few years ago. You can see a cool little cartoon on the front, but I got this book a few years ago as a gift because I really like cheese, and it's called A Quick Guide to Cheese by Robert J. Mitch, and it's from the 1970s, and I think it was originally, given as a gift because you can see some writing in the front, and it says "Brie Happy," so it's cute. But it's a first edition from 1973, and it's really cool because it has like everything you would want to know about cheese in it, and it has a whole bunch of like really cute like little just cute little like cartoon like pictures in it, along with like definitions of everything that has to do with the cheese, and like all different types of cheese, and like where it's from, and everything. So I thought that was super cool. And then I also got another book as a gift called A Taste of Rome. Wow. And this is also another first edition. This is a first American edition because I think it was originally in like Italian. But, from I think also the 1970s. I think it was 1975. And this is really cool because it has like actual like recipes in it, and then it has like pictures to go with it.
Very interesting.
I thought it was really cool. Yeah, I got these as gifts for Christmas and for my birthday and stuff.
So are you going to start kind of collecting those yourself as well? Maybe?
Like, that's kind of cool. And then my dad got some as well. He got one on like wine and like what foods to pair it with and stuff.
Well, now you got your wine book. You have the cheese book. That should.
Yeah, I think that was the idea because it was given to me by like the same person.
Yeah. Oh, that is so exciting. I love it. I love this idea of cookbooks as gifts. That's really awesome. Anybody else have a cookbook they want to share? Helen? Okay, Helen, then Maureen.
Okay, I actually forgot mine, but I found a picture on the internet. So if I can share my screen, I'll just show it real quick.
Absolutely.
Okay. So is everyone seeing it?
Oh, yeah. That's
So I found this in my grandmother's house when she was moving to a nursing home when I was 15. And it's a cookbook from 1981 called Tar Heel Tastes. For anyone who may not know, Tar Heel is the name for a, oh wait, I think I paused my screen share.
we see it just fine.
Tar Heel is the name for like North Carolinians. It dates from the period when we were big into naval stores like turpentine and pitch, and like it meant that, that's what we worked with. Anyway, so I found this book and I was immediately drawn to it because I was getting into baking and like cooking as a teenager, and I wouldn't have used this phrase at this time, but I was also like unpacking my cultural identity as a North Carolinian. But anyway, so I was like, Tar Heel, cool. So I started looking at it, and it's really interesting. It was written as kind of a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society, I think. It was edited by Peggy Mann, who that name did not mean anything to me as a 15-year-old, but I later found out that she hosted a local TV show, like a hospitality and cooking show for like 25 years, from like the 50s to right before this book was published. So she would have been very well known to like multiple generations of North Carolina women as this very prominent kind of homemaker and cooking personality. And also she apparently was kind of a pioneer for, local women in TV in North Carolina. But the book has all of these little like introductory sections where it talks about, desserts in the history of North Carolina or whatever. And it also features, being 1981, there's this really interesting, some of the recipes are, clearly older. They have very basic ingredients. Or they might feature ingredients like lard that have kind of fallen from favor recently. And then there are others that are very, incorporate modern kind of prepared or convenience foods like blueberry yum yum, but with Cool Whip, so that kind of thing. And there's also a biscuit recipe that my grandma handwrote in the back of the book. And it says, I got this from Michael, and Michael's my dad. So that's really sweet. So I haven't made anything out of it in a long time, but I have made a bunch of things. I've made a bunch of the pastries and or cakes and biscuits. There's things you would expect, like pound cake and 1, 2, 3, 4 cake, which is just like a super basic cake recipe that would have been easy to remember. So people didn't necessarily have to write it down, but then it shows up in these cookbooks. So that's a special cookbook for me. And my copy is fully falling apart now, but still very special.
That just so wonderful. And I love that. It has such a wonderful connection. Also, again, regional identity in there. I think that's great. And I love the spiral bound. I just love those spiral bound cookbooks. Those are so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Helen. That was just wonderful. Okay, Maureen.
I'll be quick. So this is an example of how not to keep your your cookbooks. Oh, this is horrible. It's all breaking up. Anyway, and lard. It's all about lard, right? It's the Crisco cookbook. 1989.
Love it.
I have baked just about every pie in here. Yeah, so that's how not to keep your cookbook.
But it does show that it was used though, and you're keeping it together. So as long as you
it's a corporation, right? It's published by the Crisco people, right? So,
yeah.
But the thing about it is they put it out there to all these ladies in the whole country, and so they all brought in from Idaho and California and Georgia and stuff like that. So. And then they won prizes, so that's kind of cool.
That's so interesting. Yay! And I love those corporations. I know, like we've seen. I think probably like Duncan Hines probably has. They've got, I think, a cookbook, and yes, absolutely. So we see that happening all the time, and it's so cool to look back on. So continue to keep it, and I think you continue to use it. That's
Joy Ellen, can I point out real quick, I put a PDF in the chat. It's an article I wrote for the Cobb County Genealogy Society about family recipes, and it's relevant to today. If you guys are interested in making your own recipe book, like genealogy-wise, to pass down to your kids and stuff like that. Anyway, just check it out.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And then Steph, did you have a comment or cookbook?
I just had a comment, and it's actually very relevant to what you were talking about gifts and what Maggie was just saying. So most of the cookbooks that I have are recipes that I print off and put in sleeves, and I have like probably 7 huge binders depending on what it is, and then I have one for the stuff that I use the most often, so I don't have to pull out these big books. But my oldest daughter graduates from Kennesaw on Friday, and I've determined that, when she moves out, whenever that is, not pushing her, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take her favorite recipes and pictures of our family, and you can actually create your own cookbook. So it'll be like a custom cookbook, just for our family, and then that's something that she can, use and write in, and I encourage all, so that's where you get to like the kind of micro cookbook of it really being specific to what you have. So
what company are you using?
I've looked at a couple of different versions. It depends. You can do you can wrap the book in pictures, you can put pictures inside and stuff. So I'm going to investigate. I have a little time. She hasn't indicated that she's moving anytime soon.
Sorry.
It makes me want to cry. That is the most touching thing.
In the handout, I know like Shutterfly and places like that.
Yeah, Shutterfly does it. Blurb does it.
Yeah, and just go to Pinterest and just get ideas of other people's templates so that you can like download and make it yourself rather than going through a company. And you would print everything out yourself. But so it was like we make a family calendar every single year on Shutterfly, and so I guess I should put together a recipe book.
Yeah, I never really even thought of that. That is an incredible idea.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Steph. That's wonderful. Oh my gosh, she's going to be so happy when she receives that, whenever that is. Yay. Okay. Well, I have one cookbook that I'd like to share, but does anyone have anything else? Okay. Well, I'll be super fast. As you all, I don't know if you all know, you probably do, but again, I collect books on the Amish. So this is one that I really love. It is called the Authentic Amish Cookbook. So this is one that's really special to me. It's by Norman and Marlena Miller. So of course, as you can see, it's spiral bound. It's, humble cookbook. And I love this one because it's actually, the publisher is Harvest House Publishers, but the copyright is Ridgeway Publishing. Ridgeway Publishing is actually an Anabaptist book-selling company that was created by the authors, Norman and Marlena Miller. They own that company. And the book has 450 recipes from Amish and communities in Everett, Michigan. And so I think that is so interesting because this is the kind of cookbook that really started to show me, oh, like, you know, a lot of the books I had previously were books about the Amish or on the Amish, but the Amish actually have their own, I call it Amish print culture. They have their own, they publish, they print for their communities and for the general public. But anyway, so they have their own tradition in that area. So in this cookbook, you'll find, in addition to the 450 recipes, there are like measurement tips and like tips for cleaning, things that you would normally see. But some things that you wouldn't normally see in a cookbook that are very reflective of Amish culture are, like, for example, these, the recipes for, how do they put it? They say, yes, these large quantity recipes. Because as you all might know, the Amish are very communal. And so, for example, it'll have like this mixed fruit recipe serves 450. And that might be for like an Amish wedding because they invite the whole community there. So things like that. But this one I love is this recipe called, it's called Peanut Butter for Church. And the reason why I really like that is because when I first saw that, I was like, that makes sense. Because in a lot of my Amish fiction novels, like this one right here, the farm stand, on page 197, it says, Selena lifted a platter of peanut butter spread and started for the Eshes family's back door. As usual, she and the other women serving lunch, and after the service were preparing lunch in the kitchen before heading to the barn. So they eat peanut butter a lot on Sundays. You'll see that again here because in this book as well. And it's because for the Amish, you know, Sunday is their Sabbath, so they don't like to do any type of work like cooking. So they often will serve like peanut butter, pretzels, lunch meat, you know, breads and pies that they have cooked the day before. So I don't know what it is, but they like to have kind of like more of a picnic style, things that are easy to put together. And then in Beverly Lewis's book, The Wish, Leona is courting a man named Tom. And he says to her, he was telling her how much his mother loves her peanut butter spread. And he said, she also likes your peanut butter spread, so I'll have to get some at your mother's market stand. Mom says it's sweeter than any she's tasted. It sure goes mighty fast at our house. So it's like a big compliment. Like, I really like your peanut butter spread. That's a big deal. So anyway, I have made a couple things from this cookbook. I did learn the importance of bread flour. I tried to make bread with regular all-purpose flour, and it was really crumbly. There's a reason why you should have bread flour or something, some with some more protein. And so I've made a couple things and marked. I've made some nice granolas from here. So anyway, in addition to being something that I love in terms of my interests, I enjoy experimenting too with the recipes. So anyway, but thank you all so much that was so interesting. I love getting to know you all through, you know, we got to get a window into your life through your cookbooks, and just largely, this is so sad. I feel like this is, you know, but it's not the end. We're going to resume the programs in fall. We're just going to take a break for summer, but thank you all so much for joining us today. And we've been doing this for like almost a year now. And I think it's just been wonderful helping us get through this quarantine. And so I just have had so much fun. I think I might put out another survey at the end of the summer. We'll see. Just want to make sure the programs are still meeting everyone's needs, or if you all have ideas. I might just do a blanket, hey, do you have ideas? Do you have things you want to talk about? So we can gear up for our fall semester. We're going to continue. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, babe. We're going to continue the Coffee with a Curator programs, but I think we're also going to be doing some in-person, hopefully, but I'll let you all know as well. But Anyway, thank you guys so much. I hope you have an incredible, restful, wonderful summer. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you guys hopefully in just a couple months. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.